Good morning, and welcome to your morning cereal. Okay, good morning, and welcome to Monday, and also welcome to March. And as I mentioned on Friday, we can look forward to March Madness this month. It's the NCAA basketball tournament. I'm sure everybody knows that, but because of that, March is also known as the worst month for worker productivity. And maybe better for our frame of mind, especially if you're a Jayhawk alum like me, March symbolizes new growth and transformation as we move from winter to spring. And that's a nice way to start the new work week, right? In the new month. But tomorrow, I'll tell you how March actually got its name, and it's not nearly as good of a feel-good story. Hey, happy Clean Monday. It's also National Simplify Your Life Day and National I Want You to Be Happy Day. Prediction, this is going to be a great day. It's also going to be a great week and a great month for all of us. All right, well, we're going to need some seriously positive quotes today to live up to that. One fun nostalgic quote, and then a second quote to tease our book review later in the episode. Hopefully, one of these quotes will speak to and jumpstart your day and your week in a positive direction. Okay, the first quote is, "Never bend your head. Always hold it high. Look the world straight in the eye." End quote. And you know who said this? This is a quote about standing tall, believing in yourself, confidently facing this world. This was a quote from Helen Keller. Look, if she can overcome and find success and find happiness, shouldn't we all be able to do that as well? And today's teaser quote from the book review is, quote, "I had the satisfaction of controlling my temper, the satisfaction of returning kindness for an insult," end quote. And as usual, we'll unpack that here in just a few minutes during the book review segment. But first, let's jump into our usual dose of fun and historic facts from this day in history. Today's news, facts, and birthdays are from March 3rd. Okay, in 1887, Anne Sullivan, she began teaching 6-year-old blind and deaf Helen Keller. Then in 1911, American actress Jean Harlow, she was born, and she was considered the original blonde bombshell. Then on this date in 1923, the first issue of Time magazine was published. On this date in 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner, written by Francis Scott Key during the War of 1812, well, it was officially adopted as the national anthem of the United States by an act of Congress. Then moving all the way up to 1985, on this date, it's the very first episode of the sitcom Moonlighting. You remember this series, right? It was with Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis, and it was a breakthrough role for Bruce Willis, who played a wisecracking private investigator. Then moving to 1991, on this date, you'll remember LA police officers. That's when they beat up Rodney King. Then in 2005, on this date, adventurer Steve Fawcett, we just mentioned him last week, but he became the first person to complete a solo, nonstop circumnavigation of the globe without refueling. He landed in Kansas after more than 67 hours in flight. And then lastly, on this date, all the way back in 2024, Caitlin Clark, she became the all-time leading scorer in NCAA basketball, ultimately scoring 3,951 points. And I guarantee she really wanted to get to that 4,000-point mark. But she surpassed Pete Maravich's record of 3,667 points. And I think most people acknowledge the two are hard to compare because they came from different eras and there are different rules, but they were both incredible feats. Well, happy birthday to you if today is your birthday. You share a birthday with singer Camila Cabello. She's 28 today. Actor Jessica Biel, she's 43. Actress Julie Bowen of Modern Family, she's 55. And former U.S. track star Jackie Joyner-Kersee, she's 63 today. And the number one movie on this date back in 1995 was The Brady Bunch. Not sure if you saw that one. I'm pretty sure I saw it, but this was obviously a movie inspired by the popular 1970s show, The Brady Bunch sitcom. Now, that's a nostalgic throwback to being a kid and watching those zany Brady kids get in and out of trouble. So cheesy, though. It was the highest level of cheesiness. Well, the number one song on this date back in 1983, and prepare yourselves, I'm going to say it, it's a classic. It's Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. And it's hard not to have a lot of Michael Jackson nostalgia, as the 80s were his biggest decade, and he put out some of the greatest songs of all time. Billie Jean being no different. This was actually the second song released off of Michael's Thriller album, which had other songs like Beat It, The Girl Is Mine, Pretty Young Thing, Wanna Be Startin' Something, and of course, the song Thriller. And the Thriller album is still considered the best-selling album of all time, with over 70 million copies sold worldwide. Let's move on to some thrilling personal growth in the book review segment of Morning Serial. This is where we take a few moments to reflect on lessons learned from the current book we're reading. And currently, we're reading through Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a timeless book that is consistently on all the must-read lists, and it's packed with rock-solid advice and actions for all of us to use and build healthy foundational concepts to live by. Yesterday, we finished up Chapter 8 of Part 3, and that chapter is entitled, A Formula That Will Work Wonders for You. And earlier in this book review, we talked about understanding the other person's perspective. And in this chapter, Carnegie doubled down on that philosophy. Remember, every person we meet is primarily interested in their own world and in their own issues and concerns. The one thing Carnegie wants you to take away from this book is, quote, an increased tendency to think always in terms of other people's points of view and see things from their angle as well as your own, end quote. In a chapter entitled A Formula That Will Work Wonders for You, Carnegie's Principle 8 was try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Which brings us to today, and today we're beginning Chapter 9 of Part 3 with that chapter entitled What Everybody Wants. And Carnegie begins this chapter by giving us a magic phrase that will stop people in their tracks. It will calm them down. It will stop arguments, etc. And this is the magic phrase, quote, I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do, end quote. And Carnegie says this statement is as true as the ocean is blue. Why? Because if we were truly the other person, then we'd have had their experiences. We'd be in their environment. We've had their temperament, their perspective. And you would truly make the same decision or have the same feeling as them, because you'd be them and not you. That reminds me of some saying from Ace Ventura, but I digress. Carnegie would suggest that each of us have very little to do with what we are. And Carnegie says, quote, and remember, the people who come to you irritated, bigoted, unreasoning, deserve very little discredit for being what they are. Feel sorry for the poor devils. Pity them. Sympathize with them, end quote. Carnegie believes that the vast majority of people out there are just thirsting for sympathy and that we should give it to them. Carnegie tells a personal account here to illustrate. While Carnegie was on a radio show discussing the author of Little Women, Louisa May Alcott, he had twice mistakenly mentioned that she was from Concord, New Hampshire, when Concord is actually located in Massachusetts. Well, he received a lot of flack for the geographical blunder, and one was particularly scathing. And Carnegie's humor comes out again, saying of the woman that just tore him apart in a letter. He said, thank God I am not married to that woman, end quote. Even though Carnegie's first human impulse was to hit back and write her back, telling her, quote, although he had made a mistake in geography, she had made a far greater mistake in common courtesy, end quote. And then he would rip into her after that. But as many of Carnegie's principles have taught us, we shouldn't give in to those initial human impulses. We should be disciplined to act in a higher way, taking the higher road. Well, Carnegie decided to call the woman who wrote him the nasty note the next time he was in her town, and he was determined to make a friend of her. Carnegie actually states it was a bit of a game to him to see if he could win her over, and I'm sure there's some pathology in that, but we'll unpack that later. Carnegie gives an account of that call, and in summary, he right up front apologizes, and he lays it on a bit thick that he could be so stupid to make the unforgivable mistake to say the wrong state on the radio show, and to thank her for taking the time out of her busy, important person's schedule to let him know, and saying that he hopes she writes him again if he makes another blunder. I summarized that, and there was some back and forth discussion between those highlights, but she was immediately embarrassed and backtracked, saying she was ashamed that she wrote the letter in those terms. She was proud of her state and her family's prominence there, and she was distressed that the author wasn't properly described as being from her state. So she apologized for losing her temper in the letter, and she was impressed at how he accepted her criticism. Carnegie had apologized and sympathized with her, and in return, she had apologized and sympathized with him. Carnegie said, quote, "I had the satisfaction of controlling my temper, the satisfaction of returning kindness for an insult," end quote. And that felt infinitely better than losing his temper and just telling her off. That high road is hard to take in the moment, but I agree there is some satisfaction in being the bigger person if handled correctly, and maybe not handled like a Karen might want to handle it on their high road. There's a big difference between that, right? And what Carnegie is discussing here. Well, we're going to finish chapter 9 tomorrow and learn Carnegie's 9th principle. So come back for that tomorrow. And apologies to all the Karens out there that I may have just offended, including our personal friend Karen. You know we love you. Well, it's going to be a great day today. Helen Keller also said, quote, "Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence," end quote. Attack this Monday. Attack this life with optimism and confidence. Thanks for joining today. Come back tomorrow and have a fantastic day. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Morning Serial podcast on the One Life Live It channel. You can find more episodes and videos by visiting our YouTube channel and the website at Sean Inglis and at SeanInglis.com, where you can also follow our other podcasts, the Mr. and Mrs. Inglis podcast and the Life Happens podcast. In these other podcasts, we'll dive deeper into everyday issues, self-improvement and well-being, business and finance, and we welcome special guests too. So join us. It'll be a good time, I promise. Thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow.